All I did, and all I tried to do, was for the good of the realm, and the Iron Throne, Rogar Baratheon, Fire and Blood, a surfeit of rulers. In the year 49 AC, the people of Westeros welcomed much-needed respite from the chaos and conflict and bloodshed that had come from the last few years under the rule of Maegor the Cruel and his war with the Faith. It would be a year of peace, plenty, and marriage, remembered in the annals of the Seven Kingdoms as the Year of the Three Brides. It was a year of hope and change that would begin to set the course for the rest of the long reign of Jaehaerys Targaryen. 2 weeks into this bright new year was the first of these 3 weddings that gave it its name. Unexpectedly, it came out of the west from Fair Isle by the Sunset Sea in a small and swift ceremony under the sky. Rhaena Targaryen wed Androw Farman, the second son of the Lord of Fair Isle. It was the groom's first marriage, the bride's third. Though twice a widow, Rhaena was but 26 years of age. Her new husband was just 17, notably younger. A comely and admirable youth, said to be utterly besotted with his new wife. Even if the match, for many, seemed out of the blue and confusing. This small wedding was presided over by the groom's father, Androw Farman, Lord of Fair Isle, and conducted by his own septon. Lord Lyman Lannister, the Lord of Casterly Rock, and his wife Jocasta were the only great lords in attendance, which is not surprising given their role during Rhaena's time in hiding from Maegor when he first claimed the throne. Also in attendance was 2 of Rhaena's former favourites of her youth, Samantha Stokeworth and Elaine Royce, both of whom had made their way to Fair Isle, making the long journey with some haste to stand with the widowed queen, together with the groom's high-spirited sister and another favourite of Rhaena, the Lady Alyssa Farman. The remainder of the guests were bannermen and household knights sworn to either House Farman or House Lannister. King and court remained entirely unaware of the marriage, till a raven from Casterly Rock brought word of it, days after the wedding feast and bedding that had sealed the match. Of the few who kept the court records of this time in King's Landing, we know this. It is reported by multiple sources that Queen Regent Alyssa was deeply offended by her exclusion from her daughter's wedding, and that relations between mother and child were never as warm afterwards. It would leave lasting damage. Lord Rogar Baratheon, the Lord Protector and Hand of the King, was furious that Rhaena had dared remarry without the crown's leave. It was custom that members of the royal family seek the crown's approval to marry. In most cases, they would give consent. In practice, it was just a formality, as royal matches were long in negotiation and planning. In the case of Rhaena, the crown was not currently her brother, King Jaehaerys, but her mother Alyssa and Rogar Baratheon himself. While it was common to give permission for matches with little resistance, had Rhaena asked permission of this match in particular, there was no certainty it would have been granted because of who the marriage candidate was, as Androw Farman was the second son of a minor lord, who was thought by many to be far, far from worthy of the hand of a woman who had twice been a queen and remained the mother of the king's current heir. Given the current small size of the royal family, these matches and marriages needed to be handled tactically with much political planning to best ensure the growth and benefit of the realm and House Targaryen. It is clear that the regents had their own plan. It just so happened that the youngest of Lord Rogar Baratheon's brothers remained unwed, and his lordship also had 2 nephews by another brother who were of suitable age and lineage to be considered potential matches for a Targaryen widow. Facts which might well explain both the hand's anger and the secrecy within which Rhaena wed, knowing well Orys's plans for her. While there was anger from the regents, the same could not be said for Rhaena's younger siblings, King Jaehaerys and Princess Alysanne, who rejoiced at the news, dispatching gifts and congratulations to Fair Isle, and commanding that the Red Keep's bells be rung in celebration, something that the regents reluctantly allowed. I do not have time for tears. Rhaena Targaryen, Fire and Blood, the Sons of the Dragon. While the marriage of the twice-widowed former Queen Rhaena was a noteworthy event at the time, the truth is the regents had much more to worry about in ruling a very troubled kingdom. So as Rhaena Targaryen was celebrating her marriage on Fair Isle, back in King's Landing, Jaehaerys and his mother, the Queen Regent, were busy selecting the councillors who would help them rule the realm at least for the next 2 years until Jaehaerys came of age and could rule in his own right. Conciliation remained their guiding principle, as the divisions that had so recently torn Westeros apart were very far from being healed, and in truth would take decades to mend. Simply rewarding his own loyalists and excluding Maegor's men and the faith from power would only exacerbate the wounds and let them fester and give rise to new grievances. The young king is said to have reasoned. His mother seems to have agreed. Some say this is another point of evidence from the early days of the reign of King Jaehaerys that indicates he will grow to become a truly great king. Accordingly, Jaehaerys reached out to the Lord of Claw Isle, Edwell Celtigar, who had been the hand of the king under Maegor the Cruel, and recalled him to King's Landing, not to serve as hand, but to serve as Lord Treasurer and Master of Coin. For his Lord Admiral and Master of Ships, the young king did the expected and obvious thing, and turned to his uncle, Daemon Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, Queen Alyssa's brother and one of the first lords to abandon Maegor in favour of Jaehaerys. Prentice Tully, the Lord of Riverrun, was summoned to court to serve as Master of Law, and with him came his redoubtable wife, the Lady Lucinda, famed for her fierce piety, having shielded the Red Dog, Sir Joffrey Doggett and the warrior's sons and other faithful from Maegor during the Faith Militant Uprising. Command of the City Watch, the largest armed force in King's Landing, the king entrusted to Carl Corbray, Lord of Heartsholme, who had fought beside his brother Aegon the Young Crowned beneath the God's Eye, and above them all stood Rogar Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and the Hand of the King. It would be a mistake to underestimate the influence of Jaehaerys, however, during the years of his regency, as despite his youth, the boy king had sat at most every council, but not all, which would become a point of contention very soon, as he was never shy about letting his voice be heard. In the end, however, the final authority at this time rested with his mother, the Queen Regent, and the Hand, Rogar Baratheon, a redoubtable man in his own right. Like most of his Baratheon kin, blue-eyed, black-haired, black-bearded, and muscled like a bull, Lord Rogar was the oldest of his 5 brothers, all grandsons of Orys One Hand, the first Baratheon Lord of Storm's End. Orys had been a bastard brother to Aegon the Conqueror and his most trusted commander. After slaying Argilac the Arrogant, the last of the Durandons, the last Storm King, he had taken Argilac's daughter to wife. Lord Rogar could thus claim both the blood of the dragon and that of the Storm Kings. There were still those in Westeros who claimed that Rogar, being a combination of these bloodlines, was more precious than House Targaryen on its own. Rogar, unlike his famed grandfather, was no swordsman, however. His lordship preferred to wield a double-bladed axe in battle, an axe he often said large and heavy enough to cleave through a dragon's skull. Those were very dangerous words during the reign of Maegor the Cruel, but if Rogar Baratheon feared Maegor's wrath, he hid it very well. Men who knew him were unsurprised when he gave shelter to Queen Alyssa and her young children after their flight from Maegor's grasp, and when he was the first to proclaim Jaehaerys king. His own brother Boris was heard to say that Rogar dreamed of facing Maegor in single combat and cutting him down with his axe. That dream fate denied him, as Maegor seemingly died by his own hand. Instead of king-slaying, Lord Rogar became a kingmaker, delivering Prince Jaehaerys to the Iron Throne. Few questioned his right to take his place at the side of the young king as Hand. Some went so far as to whisper that it would be Rogar Baratheon who ruled the realm henceforth. For Jaehaerys was but a boy, and the son of a weak father in Aenys, whilst his mother was only a woman, and when it was announced that Lord Rogar and Queen Alyssa were to marry, the whispers only grew louder. For what is a queen's lord husband, if not a king? Some argued this was always Rogar's plan, others that he made the best of the circumstances that he had found in front of him. Rogar had been married once before, but his wife had died young, taken off by a fever less than a year after their wedding, and he had remained unwed ever since. The Queen Regent Alyssa was 42 years old, and thought to be past her childbearing years. The Lord of Storm's End 10 years her junior. Writing some years later, Septon Barth says that Jaehaerys was deeply opposed to the match. The young king felt his hand was overreaching, motivated by desire for power and position than any true affection for his mother. But even more concerning to the young king is that he was angry that neither his mother nor Rogar had sought his leave as well. Barth said, as he had raised no objections to his sister's marriage, the king did not believe he had the right to prevent his mother's. Jaehaerys thus held his tongue and gave no hint of his misgivings, save to a few close confidants. It's believed his sister Alysanne among them. There is also the argument that given Jaehaerys was still in his minority, thus his need for a regent in the first place, he had no real power to prevent the match, even if he wanted to. What favoured Rogar and Alyssa was their popularity individually among the lords. The Hand was admired for his courage, respected for his strength, feared for his military prowess and skill at arms. The Queen Regent too was loved. So beautiful, so brave, so tragic, women said of her. Even such lords as might have balked at the idea of a woman ruling over them were willing to accept her as their liege. Secure in the knowledge she had Rogar Baratheon stood beside her, and the promising young king less than a year away from his 16th name day. She had been a beautiful child, all men agreed, the daughter of the mighty Aethan Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, and his lady wife Alara of House Massey. Her line was ancient, proud and rich, her mother an esteemed great beauty, her grandsire amongst the oldest and closest friends of Aegon the Conqueror and his queens, Rhaenys and Visenya. The gods blessed Alyssa herself with the deep purple eyes and shining silvery hair of old Valyria, and gave her charm and wit and kindness as well, and as she grew, suitors flocked around her from every corner of the realm and beyond the narrow sea. There was never any true question of whom she would wed though. For a woman such as her, only royalty would suffice, and given the history of matches between House Targaryen and House Velaryon, the blood of old Valyria, it was no surprise that in the year 22 AC, she married the young Prince Aenys Targaryen, the heir to the Iron Throne. It was a happy and fruitful marriage. Prince Aenys was gentle and an attentive husband, warm-natured, generous, and never unfaithful. Alyssa bore him 5 strong, healthy children, 2 daughters and 3 sons, and a 6th, another daughter who died in the cradle shortly after birth. And when Aegon the Conqueror died in 37 AC, the crown passed to Aenys, and Alyssa became his queen. And a good queen she was. But in the years that followed, she saw her husband's reign crumble and turn into ash, as enemies rose up all around him. In 42 AC, he died, a broken man, despised, only 35 years of age. The queen scarce had time to grieve for him before his brother Maegor seized the throne that rightly belonged to her eldest son, Aegon the Uncrowned. She saw her Aegon rise up against Maegor and die, together with his dragon, and a short while later her second son Viserys followed, tortured to death by Tyanna of the Tower, Maegor's sorceress wife. Together with her 2 younger children, Alyssa was made a prisoner in all but name of the man who had brought about the death of her sons, and was made to bear witness when her eldest daughter, Rhaena, was forced into a marriage to that same monster. The Game of Thrones takes many strange and unpredicted turns, however, and Maegor himself had fallen in turn, in no small part thanks to the courage of the widowed Queen Alyssa and the boldness of Lord Rogar Baratheon, who had befriended her and taken her in when no one else would. The gods had been good to them and granted them victory, and now the woman that had been Alyssa of House Velaryon was given a second chance at happiness with a new husband.